Hi there. Welcome to our daily Advent devotional for Thursday, December 10th, 2020. My name's Denise Haskins, and I'm so glad to be here with you today. Today, I want to dive right into the lesson from A Christmas Carol. And again, we are using the book 52 Little Lessons from A Christmas Carol by Bob Welch. And this particular one is called Blessed Are the Poor. And I hope you'll forgive me. They're such well written. I want to actually share pieces of this with you. You know, we see Scrooge on his journey with the spirit of Christmas present, visiting a number of different places that Scrooge himself would never have ventured into on his own. Certainly not be one because he's unlikely to be aware of them, but secondly because for a man of his stature, of his wealth, these would be very hard pressed to go to. And the theme, if jollier, is a little less personal from the Ghost of Christmas Past, because the Ghost of Christmas Present wants to give Scrooge a perspective on the poor. Poverty is not a topic that we like to talk about, but at the time that Dickens wrote A Christmas Carol in 1843, the disenfranchised, I'm quoting here, the disenfranchised were struggling to feed their families amid England's draconian rules that forced many impoverished people into prisons and, as Scrooge himself mentioned, workhouses. Conditions for the lower class were horrid. People without fireplaces would set fires anyway in an attempt to keep warm. At the time, a third of all deaths in London were estimated to be of children. In the 1840s, London was such a place of haves and have-nots that novelist and politician Benjamin Disraeli referred to his country as made up of two nations, the rich and the poor. Charles Dickens was known as benevolent giver of gifts to the poor, in part because he recognized the poor because he had been there himself once upon a time. But Dickens always looked for hope in the hopeless and among them. He looked for the good in people, not so much about what is, but what might be. And even sometimes, if he had to sprinkle a little fairy dust in order to make that happen. Some of that might come across as sentimentality, but for Dickens it was very real. And he knew that virtue dwells rather oftener, as goes the quote, in alleys and byways than she does in courts and palaces. When he was a newspaper man in his early career, before his writing took off, he had often seen London's seamier side. But the fact of the matter is, he had lived in that world himself. He grew up in Camden Town, where the Cratchits in his book live. And he could relate to the loss of Tiny Tim because he had lost two siblings himself. He was brought up by a father who it resembles Scrooge's father, a man who was an unmitigated disaster. And the family moved more than 20 times in 18 years, even being physically evicted for non-payment of rent. And thus, amid this cold knuckle plight of those in poverty, Dickens paints the Christmas spirit rising above the strife in places that don't conjure much thought of cheer. Maybe it's the marketplace where he has grocers and customers alike in the best humor possible. Or when the spirit of Christmas present takes Scrooge to a miner's cottage where a cheerful company assembled around a glowing fire. Or in a lighthouse where two lightkeepers wish each other Merry Christmas with a toast of grog. These are unlikely places. They have not much in physical things, and yet the spirit of Christmas exists there. A spirit that does not exist in Scrooge's own home himself, where he himself is. And he asks the Ghost of Christmas Present how it decides on whom to sprinkle from its torch of goodwill, to which the spirit responds, to any kindly given, to a poor one most. And when Scrooge asks, well, why to a poor one most? Because it needs it most. Dickens' passion for the poor mirrors that of Christ in the scriptures. There are over 300 verses on the poor and social justice and God's concern for both sprinkled throughout the Bible. In Luke 6:21, for example, we read these words: "Blessed are you who are hungry now, for you will be filled. And blessed are you who weep now, for you will laugh." These words from the Sermon on the Plains. And also from James chapter 2, verse 5, where Jesus' own brother writes these words: "Listen, my beloved brothers and sisters, has not God chosen the poor in the world to be rich in faith and to be heirs of the kingdom that he has promised to those who love him?" The riches of the kingdom of God have been promised to all of us, but it seems that the poor are the ones who most often look forward to and accept this beautiful promise from God. Most of us live our lives somewhere in between, neither rich nor poor. But in A Christmas Carol, we are less concerned with the bottom line of our personal ledgers than the bottom line of our hearts. And so the book asks us, as the readers, not just of Scrooge, who are we? Are we givers or are we takers? Are we proud or are we humble? Are we like Scrooge before his enlightenment, or are we more like the Scrooge at the beginning of the book? And who do we see in the mirror? This Christmas season, like so many before, we have opportunities to demonstrate God's love for all, particularly those who are in need. Our missions this year include our giving tree, in which we are collecting baby items, and you can find the specific details about what those items are in our bulletin as well as in our newsletter. They will be put together to develop layette kits and maternity kits to go to people around the world who may not have access to the things that they need for a new birth. This year also, we've added a new mission, World Vision. In this one particularly, we're raising money in order to purchase a donkey, a sheep, and a goat, so that we might provide for a family in need the resources for them to be able to live more healthily by having a better diet, and also the means by which they can market and farm. Additionally, we are even selling the masks with the flaming cross and WSUMC. That money is being raised for the Hubs Fund, which goes to a variety of kits that are used in different places and for different needs around the world. How is it that we are going to demonstrate our concern for the poor, for those who are in need? While we often call ourselves poor, so many ways we truly are rich, surrounded by warmth, surrounded by love, full in our bellies and a soft and safe place to sleep. Let us think on those who do not have those great blessings, and let us give accordingly.